Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. A former governor of Abia State, Orji Uzor Kalu, has been sentenced to 12 years imprisonment by the Federal High Court in Lagos, Nigeria, over a 7.1 billion naira fraud. Kalu was found guilty of the charges brought against him and others by the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission. Justice Mohammed Idris, who handed down the sentence, also ordered the winding up of Kalu's company, Slok Nigeria Limited, charged as a third defendant in the case. Orji Uzor Kalu was a governor for 8 years, 12 years ago, and now a serving senator in the 9th National Assembly. Joining us now to discuss this and more is public analyst Dr. Abiodun Adeniyi. Good morning. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Dr. Adeniyi, good morning.
Good morning, the encyclopedic.
Good morning. Good to see you again on the morning
encyclopedic show. Dr. Abati and the scholarly student. Thank you. My pleasure.
Good morning. Quickly, what do you make of the ruling in the Orji Uzor Kalu case, now that he has been sentenced to 12 years imprisonment on 39 count charges, right? Yeah.
Okay. All right, Doc. That's a good stage that we're in, as it were, but there are so many dimensions to it, in my opinion. And the first is to see Orji Kalu as a study, as a profile in confidence, in resilience in the face of trials and difficulties. You know, he never became a fugitive. He never was arrested by Interpol in Dubai or elsewhere. He never ran away. He stood through the trial all through until he got to this stage. So to that extent, you can give him kudos that while the trial lasted, he was around, still very rambunctious and still very confident, became a senator, got traditional titles, still running his businesses and employing some of the best in the land. You know, so I think he tried to that extent. You know, but having said also, there's a need also to commend the trial judge, the learned trial judge, Justice Mohammed Idris, for exhibiting another instance of profiling courage. You know, he philosophized from the bench. You know, very strong-willed, very determined, and he was concerned about about getting public officials to uphold the Constitution, the oath to which they swore to in the first instance. And it reminds me of what Nancy Pelosi is also talking about in the investigation trial against Donald Trump, that in the first instance you swore to uphold the Constitution, and the onus is consistently on you to abide by that Constitution. So it's a lesson for us, not just for public officials, but even those of us in the private sector, that at some point there will always be a judgment day. You know, that someday the jury will be called to action. And in the case of Kalu, it has come. So I think the judge deserves commendation, you know, and for philosophizing from the bench, letting us know. I remember him quoting Dele Giwa, for instance, that, you know, every day is for the thief, but one day is for the law, you know, that you cannot run perpetually as an evildoer from the wrath of the law. At some point, it will catch up with you. It's a lesson for all of us, and I think we can proceed from there. Then the other point to look at is to say that, well, it's a bigger lesson, you know, for the anti-corruption fight. You know, that it's not just a fight that public officials mouth about, it's a fight that they mean. You know, it's a fight that, yes, we think that the laws are not being activated enough, that there are no consequences, that public officials can continue to ride roughshod on public processes, you know. But we need not take things for granted. At some point, again, the law can be brought against us. But again, I think it's also important to say that perhaps the APC leadership deserves commendation, because Kalu is a very influential person, a senior chief whip, a very wealthy man. You know, so if he could not deploy his witness, if he could not deploy his influence, you know, to circumvent the law, to get out of this trial, you know, then no one else can. You know, and it also means that perhaps there were no interventions of any sort. You know, the law in this case was just allowed to take its course. I think that we have gotten to this stage, to the end of the trial after 12 years, is salutary. We can proceed from there. It's also good to say that the civil process is very open-ended. It's an enlarged one. Kalu can still appeal to the appeal court, and the Supreme Court is still there. But at the moment, we should feel gratified that we are where we are in the circumstance. Dr. Abati and Tudun.
Thank you, Doctor. You've raised so many points there. I mean, I have to add that at some point, I believe it was last November, Senator Kalu did travel abroad, flouting his bail conditions. But he returned, as you said. He could have gone abroad and stayed there. He could have fled, but he actually returned. And it also, none of us are going to forget in a hurry the famous line by APC chairman that once you join APC, your sins are forgiven, which was uttered during the campaign for the general election, I believe in January. But it appears that from what your analysis just now, that was probably more tongue-in-cheek, because we've seen this high-profile defection that still resulted in a conviction. However, I have to ask you, it was reported that Senator Kalu said, as he was being led from the courtroom to prison custody, or from the Nigerian Correctional Services, sorry, now it's been changed from prison services. It was reported that he said, 2023, here we come. What could that mean?
Well, like I said, while going through the trial, Kalu still remained very rambunctious, still very ambitious. And if you know him very closely, he's somebody that has not hidden his love to become, his ambition to preside over the affairs of this country as president. He's always had that presidential ambition. And perhaps he was probably reasoning that, like many of our political official holders do anyway, whenever they face this kind of trial, that they are not being tried because of an offense. They do not see things only from the prism of the offense that they committed. They always believe that there's a political undertone to it. It's probably thinking that, they are trying to checkmate him so that he will not become president in 2023. And I think he's allowed to feel this way. It could be a momentary escape route for him at the level of psychology. It could be therapeutic, but that's his own feeling. But I do not want to subscribe to that notion. I do not want to subscribe to that line of thinking on his part. I just think that, the law is now being activated, and it's something that we've always been talking about. We have lots of laws in this country. If they are properly executed, if they are properly implemented, if there are consequences for infractions in the law, if oaths that public officials swear to, are being adhered to strictly, and if in the face of infraction they are being dealt with, we will have moved further as a nation. Perhaps this is the beginning of what we've been expecting. So I don't think that I want to see the law as an ass. I want to see it be for what it is, that the learned trial judge and all the processes went in a way that will say is speak and span, in a way that will say is immaculate. There are no interventions, no inferences, and I think we shouldn't be distracted. We shouldn't escape using other extra-legal justifications to say it's a political judgment. I don't think so. I think it's strictly a matter of law, because the case was well established. 12 years was a long time, really, and of course we saw how it grounded, but it's okay that we have gotten to this stage. And like I said, Kalu still has the appellate courts to resort to. The Court of Appeal is still there. The Supreme Court is still there. If he thinks that the learned trial judge erred in law in the first instance, to do.
Well, the coalition of united political parties, the CUPP, while commending the judgment, had said that, well, Orji Kalu is also the chief whip in the Senate. And they have argued that even when the matter goes on appeal, he should step down immediately as chief whip of the Senate, raising a moral question as to whether indeed a convicted person can still remain a principal officer of the Senate of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. What do you think? Should he step down immediately?
Yeah, Doc, I heard you in the introductory session when you said that our law presumes that you are innocent until you are found guilty. When Kalu became chief whip, he was never convicted. But the judgment just came yesterday. Perhaps we should just wait on the Senate and see what action they will take. But we should also understand that there are so many yardsticks around which political offices are attained in this country. So many things, and most of the time we have actually criticized them to say that some of them are less than salutary, that some of them don't take into consideration the pedigree of contestants. Those things couldn't have come up when Kalu was contesting to be a presiding officer, to be a principal officer of the Senate. Don't forget that he actually wanted to be deputy Senate president, and when that didn't work, he went for the Senate chief whip. And we should also remember that this Kalu has a huge war chest, and apart from that, he's a very good fighter, a good mobilizer, and an influencer to a very large extent. And those are the things that matter in the attainment of political positions in this country, rightly or wrongly. So whether or not it should continue will have to be decided not just by himself, but by the Senate. But if you're asking him to step down now, I don't think he would take that decision on his own, but it's up to the Senate. And I trust the leadership of the Senate to take appropriate action when they come to considering this, really.
We're going to take a short break now, and when we come back, I want to take you up on this issue about convictions or indictments, because you'll find that the Constitution says that if you've been indicted for fraud, that's one of the requirements of becoming a senator. But we'll discuss that when we come back from the break. Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Still with us is public analyst Professor Abiodun Adeniyi. So before the break, you made a reference to Dr. Abati's point when we're discussing the news headlines, conviction vis-a-vis indictment. Obviously, we're having you as a guest coming on, so it's better to leave it till now to discuss it more fully. But I want you to avert your mind to Section 66, subsection 1H of the 1999 Constitution, where it says, in black and white, no person shall be qualified for election to the Senate or House of Representatives if, and this is subsection 8, he has been indicted for embezzlement or fraud by Judicial Commission of Inquiry or an administrative panel of inquiry or a tribunal, and so on and so forth. So an indictment for fraud is enough. And really, I think the point of that is to buttress the fact that these political leaders are, in fact, leaders. We're supposed to look up to our senators and, House of Reps members, ministers, the president, governors. Morality, credibility, integrity, all of these are important. They're not just words in a dictionary. So let's talk about what it means when a former governor with such serious charges, 7.1 billion naira, hanging over him, is given a ticket by APC to contest for the Senate. Well, he wasn't giving it. He was given the opportunity to contest. He won the primaries and got the ticket, and then was now appointed Senate Chief Whip. What does that actually say? Because the amount here is huge, 7.1 billion naira. And then, as we were talking earlier, we referred to the former governor of Adamawa, who was imprisoned for, I believe, 5 years for a much lesser amount, 167 million naira. That's not an awful lot of money, but still, he was convicted. So it's not really about the amount of money necessarily, but the fact that it is in billions should give people pause. Why should such a person be allowed to contest and then be appointed as Senate Chief Whip?
Your question is two-legged. The first is, should he continue to remain in the Senate after this conviction? And to that, I would say, well, the judgment is less than 24 hours, if you recall, and today is not a usual legislative day. Next legislative day in the Senate will be Tuesday. I think the onus is on us to wait and see what the Senate is going to do in this circumstance. But if you ask me, I would say that I have belief, trust in the present leadership of the Senate, where, distinguished Senator Ibrahim Lawan Ahmed, PhD Cranfield, is presiding. I do believe that he will provide leadership in this circumstance. And of course, I agree with you that somebody that is convicted shouldn't be in that cozy, hallowed chambers. Very well so indeed. And secondly, it's also unfortunate that our political process is still with filth. We still have lots of filth. But I also want to say that we should be careful. I'm not saying you have done this. We should be careful tying all of them with one brush. Some of them are still very clean. Some of them still try to be above board. But it's also good to say that, for those who are always found wanting, for those who have trials, who are facing trials, it's good for us to begin to clear the process of this set of people. So at the end of the day, there won't be complications like the one that we're having at hand. This kind of complication, if I remember very well, is the first that we're going to see in the country, somebody who has been going through trial now being convicted, and the institution of this, like the Senate, will now be challenged to come up with a resolution on what they have to do. But I also doubt if all will be limited, if all will be exclusively at the doorstep of the Senate. I think there are other agencies, other arms that will also come into play in this regard. But perhaps, like I said, 24 hours is not up to 24 hours yet. By next week, of course, or maybe at some other time, we should see them taking some more definitive action. But again, Kalu's lawyers, his attorneys, might as well try to prove that, well, it's not all over until it is over, until perhaps the case gets to the Supreme Court. But I do understand that once there's a conviction at this kind of level, at the level of the Federal High Court, it's one definite step that we have gotten to at the level of this trial. So something we'll definitely have to give in this circumstance to them.
What I was asking was actually a larger question than Senator Kalu. As you said, I wasn't tying anybody with any brush. I have nothing against Senator Kalu, perfectly lovely man. My issue is morality and integrity in the highest offices. We also have issues right now in the country with ex-governors' pensions and all kinds of really unconscionable behavior at the highest levels. Our Constitution did not envisage this quite clearly because Section 66(1)(h) that I just read said even with an indictment, you are precluded from being a senator or member of House of Representatives. My question is a broader one of how we can really sanitize our public office holders at the highest levels. Because the parties are the ones who give them tickets and give them platforms to contest. We also saw all kinds of the most egregious electoral dysfunction in Kogi State and Abia State. It's a larger topic of the parties giving platforms to just anybody with all kinds of moral or immoral tendencies.
Yeah, I think I understand you very well, but let's not forget that morality is a highly subjectivized relative matter. Always very difficult for us to properly contextualize, because whatever is moral to you may not be moral to me. And in a developing country like our own, we always have problem defining what is moral, defining what is ethical from what is not. And that's why rules, regulations, and laws are always very necessary, because those ones are much more definitive than the question of morality.
To the extent that the Constitution can, it does try to define it. Like you can't be a bankrupt, you can't have an indictment hanging over you, you can't be a convict. That points to morality. So I'm not talking about the dictionary definition of subjective definitions. I'm speaking constitutionally and how parties have flouted this and simply not enforced it. Because the topic that we're discussing today would be completely different, wouldn't it, if APC simply had not given him a ticket?
Okay, well, you asked me a question, and I'm giving you my own opinion, really. And I'm saying that morality is a subjectivized, relative matter that is often problematic in a developing country, and it will continue to be so in a nation like ours, where political offices, where people are die-hearted about political offices. So most of the time, there will always be questions, there will always be issues around it. But it is left for the law that is much more definitive, like you have cited the Constitution, for instance, to spell it out in black and white what morality is, But if we move from the level of morality, of course, we step onto the level of law, But if the laws, if rules and regulations are not activated in the political parties, or even in the larger sphere of governance, there will always be conflict, So issues of morality can actually be contextual, and that's my point, really, which I'm saying that is my own opinion, really. And I think that, I'm not justifying the fact that we have a lot of questionable people in government, a lot of questionable people with problematic pedigree, getting into public offices, getting into limelight. But I'm just saying that it's a process, We are still having it happening in our country because we are still a developing country. It's not necessarily a justification for it, but just to see that, that's what it is at the moment, Anyway, but we need more of our rules, more of our laws being activated so we can solve this problem once and for all, yeah.
Dr. Adeniyi, I think the point that, Tundu is pushing is that even beyond law and morality, there is a problem with our leadership recruitment process. And that's a major problem in our democracy. You will recall, once upon a time in this country, a retired police chief, took a look at the Senate and said most of the people in the Senate or even the entire National Assembly were criminals that he had cause at one point or the other to lock up. And Nigerians were shocked, you know, and the gentleman was compelled by the Senate to apologize for making that statement. And he said, well, he apologized, but he knew what he was saying. So should we have persons of questionable character occupying high office in Nigeria? If that is the case, then perhaps there is a need to take a second look at our leadership recruitment process. And I guess that's just a point. But let me ask you, going back to the issue of Senator Orji Uzor Kalu, Justice Idris ruled that the assets of Slok Nigeria Limited should be seized and forfeited to the federal government of Nigeria. But the people of Abia State are concerned. They're saying no. I mean, if the money was stolen from Abia State, whatever assets that may be seized should revert to Abia State, since it belongs originally, in the light of the judgment, to the people of Abia State. What do you think that Abia State can do in this instance? Should the government of Abia State go to court and insist that, assets of Slok Nigeria Limited should not go to the federal government, but should revert to Abia State? What's your opinion?
Yes, Doc, we've had several reactions to the judgment, and Orji Kalu, has been convicted for infracting on the law while being governor of Abia State for 7 years, So if there are resources, that will accrue to the government from the conviction, I think it should go to no other agency, no other institution really, but the people of Abia State, because the monies that were tampered with were allocations for the people of Abia State. And of course, if you look at that state, it's not really a developed state. Of course, those monies that will be recovered, the monies that will be recovered, I beg your pardon, will go a long way in helping them deal with issues of growth and development that I think the leaders of that state are trying to deal with. But again, back to the point I was making, if you allow me, I remember as a reporter in the Senate, Professor Oken Dibe once wrote a column on the Senate, and he referred to all of them as a committee of thieves. But my take is that 109 people cannot all be bad, and that's why I'm saying that if we want to tar people, it's not always fair to tar them with the same brush. All our politicians, we have had a problematic history of leadership. But we cannot also say that all our leaders from post-independence periods have been bad. The politicians that will keep condemning, I'm not being particular in the circumstance. From their crop, we had an Awolowo. From their crop, we had an Azikiwe, an Ahmadu Bello. I will keep having quite a number of them coming up as well, So not all of them are really bad. I agree that there's a substantial number of them with problematic pedigree. But we can deal with this, by asking on agencies, on groups, to be much more effective, to be much more productive in the implementation of their vision and their mission. And most of these vision and mission are not concerned. None of them will you see. In all of them, you won't see them talking about people who are amoral, people who are immoral, people who have the propensity to infract on the law, being played up as their leaders. But oftentimes, we'll see this happening. I think the onus is on us to continue to rein in on these people, to walk their talk, so that they can permeate the larger society for the overall good of the country, Dr. Abati.
You're absolutely right. There are a lot of politicians who sacrifice their time, their money for nation building. That's a given. So it's not all of them that are dreadful. But I do have to say some are. And the Constitution is not enforced to my satisfaction personally. But what role do you think the electorate has to play in all of this? Because we as a people, we've talked about the parties, the role of the parties, but we as a people tend to just embrace whoever comes with a lot of money. We don't ask questions. We've had a governor convicted of fraud where he had robbed his own state, returned to that state after serving a lengthy prison sentence. So a hero's welcome. What does that say about us? What is our role in enforcing and ensuring that we get a higher caliber of leadership? leadership. Very briefly, because we're running out of time.
Well, I think we just have to be more involved. We have to be more participatory in the process. We have to learn to ask questions. But can we really be asking questions in the face of poverty, in the face of deprivation, in the face of deprivation as well? You know, those are the things that bedevil the people, and that's why they just take whatever comes to them, you know. And of course, we know what happens. These people are very, very prebendal. They have massive wealth. You know, they use it, you know, to cut corners, you know, bribe their ways into power. And the people are just left docile because of their material conditions, you know. I'm not saying that until we are able to approve.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you for your insights. Thanks. We look forward to seeing you again.
As always.